My name is Lieutenant Jenna Miles, and I used to wear the uniform like a second skin. 31 years old, 3 tours overseas, 2 medals I never asked for, and one mother I never really understood. She was a legend in the Army, the kind of officer people spoke about with lowered voices and careful respect. But at home, she was a stranger, always somewhere else, even when she was sitting right in front of me. When she died, there were no long speeches, no letters of apology, no family stories finally told. Just a cold metal footlocker sitting at the edge of her empty bedroom, the kind used to store field gear and secrets. Taped to the top was a folded piece of paper in her handwriting. Open when ready. That was it. No explanation, no goodbye, just those 3 words that hit harder than any battlefield I'd ever faced. For weeks, I walked past it like it wasn't there, pretending it didn't matter, but it did. Because no matter how old you get, there's still a part of you that wants to know your mother saw you, that you were more than the mission she left behind. Every time I looked at that footlocker, I felt her silence echo back at me. I told myself I didn't care, that I had survived worse. But the truth was, I had spent my entire life trying to earn a place in a story she never let me read. So one night, when the house was too quiet and the air too heavy to sleep, I decided to stop waiting to be ready. I pulled the footlocker into the middle of the room and stared at the lock. The key felt small in my hand, almost fragile. I didn't know what I would find inside, or what it would change. But I knew this much. If she couldn't tell me who she really was, I was going to find out myself. The key turned with a click that echoed too loudly in the still room. But the lock didn't move. I had to force it, fingers slipping on the cold metal until it finally gave way with a groan that sounded more like protest than permission. When the lid lifted, a wave of scent hit me: old paper, leather, metal, and something faintly sweet, like dried tobacco or forgotten flowers. Inside, everything was arranged with eerie precision. A folded military map, yellowed with time and creased along the edges, sat on top. Beneath it, a sealed envelope rested perfectly centered, the paper so brittle it seemed, ready to disintegrate if I breathed too hard. There was a photograph, too. Faded, black and white, grainy as if it had been through water. My mother stood in uniform, her posture stiff, face half-shadowed by her cap. Next to her, another figure, taller, his face unclear. But what struck me most was the cut-clean, deliberate removing someone from the middle of the photo, like history itself had been edited. I turned the envelope over, fingers tracing my mother's handwriting. It was sharp, no nonsense, just like her. But I couldn't bring myself to open it yet. I needed to understand what I was looking at first. Tucked beneath the envelope was a manila file, stamped with a red seal that made my stomach tighten. Obsidian Fall, restricted access. I'd seen classifications like that during my service, but nothing ever surfaced in conversation. These were the files that didn't exist, the ones that were never supposed to. I opened it, careful not to smudge the faded ink. There were reports, partially blacked out, filled with code names and units I didn't recognize, and then I saw it. My name. Not just once, but underlined, highlighted in a section labeled Vulnerable Variable. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stared at the page, trying to convince myself it had to be someone else. Someone with the same initials, the same birth date, the same hometown. But it wasn't. It was me. There was a timestamp from years ago, long before I joined the Army, when I was still a kid in Georgia, playing in the backyard, while my mother packed for deployments. That file was tracking me. Not as a daughter, as a potential liability. The air in the room suddenly felt thicker, like the walls were closing in. I picked up the map again, this time flipping it over. Faint pencil marks crossed its back, barely visible, a grid of coordinates scrawled alongside notes in shorthand I didn't understand. My mother's handwriting again, only this time shakier, rushed. Nothing about this felt like inheritance. It felt like evidence. A trail someone never wanted followed. I looked at the footlocker, at how deliberately everything had been placed, and I realized this wasn't just her storage. It was her confession. Somewhere between the letter, the map, and the photo with its missing center, a story was waiting to be uncovered. And whatever my mother had been trying to bury, it had my name written all over it. I closed the lid slowly, not because I was done, but because I finally understood. This wasn't the end of her story, it was the beginning of mine. I called in a favor. Nate Barnes and I had served together back in Kandahar. He owed me one. And more importantly, he now worked behind the walls of the Department of Defense archives, deep in a section nobody outside clearance circles talked about. He met me at a side entrance. No uniform, no badge on display, just a quiet nod and a muttered, "You didn't get this from me." The hallways were sterile and windowless, the kind of place where history gets buried under layers of protocol. We stopped outside a thick steel door, labeled cold storage, deep freeze. Inside, the air dropped 10 degrees. Long aisles of sealed containers stretched into the dim, humming quiet. Nate handed me a manila folder, already pulled and logged under his credentials. 10 minutes. You scan, you don't remove. I don't know what's in there, and I don't want to. The file was stamped OP3X7, vertical bar Obsidian Fall, vertical bar Asset. JM02. My throat tightened when I saw those initials. I opened it carefully, hands suddenly unsure. Pages of mission logs, redacted transcripts, surveillance entries. Each one is heavier than the last. Then there it was. A personnel profile, half completed, attached to a photo of me at age 9. School uniform and crooked smile. Underneath, subject, Miles, Jenna M., vulnerable variable. Risk level, high. Strategic leverage. Conditional. Purpose. Contingency asset. My stomach turned. This wasn't protection. It was planned. Someone had filed my existence like a spare bullet, to be used if necessary. I kept reading, desperate for context, but the rest was just jargon and codes. Obsidian Fall. OP3X7. No clear explanation, just more questions. I looked up at Nate. He didn't ask what I saw. Just glanced at his watch and said, "Time's up." I slipped the page back in the folder. Hands colder now. Whatever this was, it went deeper than I ever imagined. And someone had made sure I was part of it from the start. The encrypted file sat at the bottom of the digital archive like a landmine. I clicked it open, expecting more redacted documents or maybe a blurry image. Instead, there was a single audio file, labeled OP3X7, INT Riker. My pulse picked up as I plugged in the secure headset and hit play. At first, all I heard was silence, then the low hum of interference. A man's voice came through, clipped, sharp, confident. "You think you can erase me? I've got leverage. I know things. I know about your daughter, Miles." My chest tightened. His name wasn't listed, but I knew who it was. Malcolm Riker, former intelligence asset, turned something darker. The kind of man you don't find in retirement photos. He went on, voice colder with each word. "You want me to disappear? Fine. But if I go down, she goes with me. Jenna. Cute kid. Still in Savannah?" There was a pause. I heard my mother breathe in, low and shaky, but steady. Then she spoke. "You come near her, you're a dead man." Riker laughed. "Then give me what I want. Immunity, clearance, safe passage. Or she's the headline." The silence that followed was worse than the threat. I waited, hoping she'd deny him, say something strong, unshakable. But her voice cracked when she finally answered. "Don't hurt my daughter. I'll handle it myself." My mouth went dry. The words landed like a punch. It wasn't just a threat to me, it was a deal, a choice. My mother didn't just walk away from service. She traded something sacred for something silent. She went off-grid, not to protect herself, to protect me. I sat there frozen, the room closing in, the audio file still playing the hiss of dead air. This wasn't a legacy. It was a debt. One she paid alone. And I never even knew it existed. I went back to the Footlocker the next morning, needing to see everything again, this time through different eyes. What I missed before now felt obvious, like pieces that had been quietly waiting for me to notice. Tucked beneath the false bottom was a smaller box, wood-worn smooth by time and touch, locked with a tiny brass latch. Inside were her personal things. A worn dog tag with the chain knotted tight, a journal wrapped in faded green cloth, and an old photo of me holding a toy soldier I didn't even remember owning. The journal was mostly notes, scribbled quickly in pencil, page after page of scattered thoughts, mission codes, and lists I couldn't make sense of at first. Then one line caught my eye. Obsidian Fall wasn't a mission. It was an erasure. I froze. I read it again, letting the weight of it settle. She hadn't just gone dark. She had chosen to disappear. The entries weren't in order, but as I pieced them together, a story formed. Riker had gone off the rails, threatened exposure, and no one in command wanted the mess on record, so they handed it to her, unofficially, quietly. The kind of operation that comes with no backup, no medals, and no return. She faked her retirement. There was even a copy of a recall order, unsigned and torn in half. She never filed it, never came back. She made herself a ghost to make sure Riker wouldn't use me as bait again. I sat there for a long time, her words staring up at me like a confession. The anger I'd carried for years started to crack. All the times I thought she was cold or distant, all the moments I assumed she didn't care, weren't indifference. They were shields. She kept me out of the story because putting me in it would have meant danger. She didn't trust the system. And maybe she didn't trust herself. But she trusted one thing. That staying gone was the only way to keep me safe. And that's exactly what she did. Quietly, completely, and without ever asking for credit. I thought she left me behind. But she didn't. She just chose to disappear from the world so I could stay in it. The call came just after midnight, when the house was silent and the weight of everything felt heaviest. No caller ID, no name, just a low voice that spoke with the calm of someone who had lived through darker things. Your mother wasn't supposed to do what she did, but it was the only way, he said. He told me they served together, that he owed her his life, and that she never asked for favors, only silence. Obsidian Fall didn't have clearance. She went off the grid, not for herself, but for you. You were going to be used, and she knew it. He paused for a moment, like he didn't want to say the next part. If you go public with this, if you try to make her a headline, it won't bring her justice. It'll drag your name into the light she spent her whole life keeping you out of. I didn't say anything. I just listened, trying to breathe through the ache, settling in my chest. She didn't die a hero because she wanted recognition, he continued. She died, knowing you'd never have to carry what she did. Don't undo that unless you're sure the world deserves it. The line clicked dead before I could ask who he was. I sat there in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear, realizing that maybe silence wasn't the absence of truth. Maybe it was the last line of defense someone like her could offer. The building felt colder than I remembered. All clean floors and silent corridors, lined with forgotten names. I walked to the counter marked for sealed records and handed over the envelope, heavy with the weight of everything my mother never said out loud. The clerk didn't ask questions. He just looked at the label and nodded. I filled out the form quietly, checking the box for defer disclosure. 30 years. Enough time to let the dust settle. To let truth breathe. Unless the family asks sooner. That was the only exception. The only way the silence could be broken was without undoing her sacrifice. Before I closed the file, I slipped in a small handwritten note. It didn't need my name. It didn't need an explanation. Just 6 words. For when she asks, I folded it once and placed it on top of the documents. The seal clicked shut, like a breath being held. I didn't feel finished. but I felt steady. This wasn't justice in the way headlines like to sell it. It was something smaller, more sacred. A choice to carry the truth, not to broadcast it. A way to let her story live without turning it into a show. As I walked out, I didn't look back. I didn't have to. The silence behind me wasn't empty anymore. It was full of love, of sacrifice, of things too heavy for medals and too private for glory. The old house was gone. Just a patch of overgrown field and a few cracked bricks where the porch steps used to be. This was where she was born, where her life started long before it ever touched war or secrets or me. I knelt near the roots of a crooked oak, the same kind she used to climb as a girl, and dug a small hole. The box was simple. Inside, I placed the photo I had restored, now whole again. My mother, 2 other soldiers, and the figure in the middle, no longer cut out. I had pieced it back together, not because I needed all the answers, but because I needed the image to be complete. Next to it, I folded a note that said only one thing. She chose to protect, not to be seen. I covered the box gently, pressed the soil down, and sat with it for a moment. The breeze was soft. The sky was open. I didn't feel like I was saying goodbye. I felt like I was finishing something that had waited too long to rest. She didn't want medals or names etched in stone. She wanted someone to know why she disappeared and still love her for it. I didn't grow up knowing my mother. Not the real one. But now I did. She wasn't a ghost. She was a shield. A quiet kind of warrior who carried more than I ever understood. I didn't get to see her be a hero. I got to see her be human. And in the end, maybe that's something more sacred. As I stood to leave, I looked back once. Not to the ground, but to the space she once filled. I understood now. She didn't need to be remembered by the world. Just by someone who knew the silence wasn't weakness. It was love. And I would carry that forever.